1 second.
Don't do what Frankie and Johnny did. Don't be a moron with the money. Do what's right, you understand?
Yeah, of course.
In May 2022, Hollywood was blindsided. Ray Liotta, the unforgettable force behind Goodfellas, passed away suddenly at 67 while working overseas. The news felt unreal. He was active, filming, and seemingly full of momentum. Yet, behind the shock and tributes, one haunting question lingered. What really happened? For nearly a year, there were no clear answers, only speculation and silence. Then the official autopsy results were released, revealing details that changed the entire conversation. What doctors ultimately found painted a far more complex picture than anyone expected. The adoption that fueled everything. Ray Liotta's story begins in New Jersey in 1954, but from the very start, it carried a sense of dislocation. He was given up shortly after birth and spent his first 6 months in an orphanage before being adopted by Alfred and Mary Liotta, a warm working-class couple of Italian and Scottish descent who raised him as their own. Ray always knew he was adopted. He even talked about it openly as a child, once turning it into a school show and tell. But knowing didn't make it easy. Beneath the surface, there was anger and confusion, especially toward the biological parents he never knew. That emotional edge would later become part of what made him so compelling on screen. His younger sister, Linda, was also adopted, which helped normalize it inside the household, even if the questions never fully went away. The Liotta home in Union, New Jersey, was Roman Catholic, though not strictly devout. Ray went through the rituals, communion, confirmation, the basics, but faith was more background noise than daily practice. Still, it lingered. Later in life, he admitted that whenever things felt uncertain or heavy, those familiar childhood prayers were what he instinctively returned to. After graduating from Union High School in 1973, where he would later be honored in the school's Hall of Fame, Ray didn't have a clear plan. College wasn't a burning ambition, and academics never felt like his lane. He nearly sabotaged the whole thing by walking out of his SATs, convinced he'd eventually end up doing construction or some other hands-on work. His father offered simple advice: go to college and take whatever feels right. That loose guidance led him to the University of Miami. And even then, acting wasn't some lifelong dream. In fact, his entry into drama was almost accidental. Standing in a registration line and staring down requirements like math and history, Ray felt instant resistance. Then he noticed a friend waiting in line for the drama department. On impulse, he joined her. What started as light, almost silly children's theater quickly became something more serious. It clicked. He found a space where emotion, instinct, and presence mattered more than textbooks. He graduated in 1978 with a Bachelor of Fine Arts, though not before spending his early years singing and dancing in musicals, far from the intense screen persona audiences would later associate with him. After college, Ray headed straight to New York City. Like most young actors, he needed steady work, so he bartended for the Schubert organization while chasing auditions. Things moved fast. Within 6 months, he had an agent. Not long after that, he landed the role that put him on the map. Joey Perini on the soap opera Another World. From 1978 to 1981, Ray became a fan favorite, known not as a tough guy, but as the sweet, dependable heartthrob. Joey was earnest, loyal, and constantly falling in love, sometimes disastrously. Years later, during an appearance on The Bonnie Hunt Show, Ray was shown clips from those early days and reacted with genuine surprise. Watching himself play the clean-cut hero felt almost surreal. Joey Perini was the complete opposite of the dangerous, volatile characters that would define his film career. On the soap, he was gentle, respectful, and devoted to his mother. But being a soap character meant life was never simple. Joey's storyline veered into full melodrama, a heartfelt proposal followed by sudden tragedy, a hospital stay that led to falling for a nurse who turned out to be incredibly wealthy, and a marriage undone by secrets and misunderstandings. It was over-the-top emotional storytelling, and Ray leaned into every beat to the break that nearly slipped. After putting in several steady but limiting years on the soap opera Another World, Ray Liotta reached a breaking point. In 1981, he made the classic high-risk move and headed west to Los Angeles, chasing something bigger, a real shot at movies. Hollywood, of course, wasn't built for easy entry. The industry often favors familiar last names and insider connections. And while talent still matters, access usually decides who even gets in the room. Ray arrived without shortcuts. The early years were thin. He picked up small roles where he could, including a brief appearance in a short-lived Casablanca television adaptation and a guest spot on St. Elsewhere. To keep improving, he enrolled in acting classes taught by Harry Mastro, a respected coach whose students included future heavyweights like Bryan Cranston and Jim Hinu. What made those classes even more remarkable was who was sitting beside him. Ray was training alongside Kevin Costner, Stephen Bauer, and Bauer's then-wife, Melanie Griffith. At the time, they were all just working actors trying to get noticed. By 1986, Griffith caught her break when she landed a lead role in a new Jonathan Demme film called Something Wild. Ray, now 30, felt stuck. His career wasn't collapsing, but it wasn't moving either. Reaching out for help didn't come naturally to him, and it took some convincing before he even considered calling Griffith. He wanted success to come on his own terms, not through favors. Still, his parents, both politically minded, reminded him of a hard truth. Progress sometimes requires picking up the phone. Word of the role had already been floating around his acting class, but his agent couldn't secure an audition. Griffith, already cast, had influence and made it clear to director Jonathan Demme that Ray was someone he needed to meet. That recommendation opened the door. Ray walked into the audition tense, but prepared. He pushed his nerves aside, focused on the work, and delivered a raw, explosive scene opposite Jeff Daniels. When he left the room, he felt he had done everything he could. Then came the waiting. Days passed. Confidence gave way to doubt. By midweek, he was already convincing himself that this was another mischance, and that time was slipping away. Then the call came. Demme told him the role was his. It was a release of years of frustration, patience, and quiet belief finally paying off. Something Wild changed everything. Ray's performance was electric, unpredictable, and impossible to ignore. Critics took notice immediately. The industry did, too. A Golden Globe nomination followed, and overnight Ray Liotta became a name people remembered. But with that attention came a new concern. The intensity that made him stand out also threatened to lock him into one type of role. Scripts flooded in, many of them leaning hard into violent or unstable characters. Instead of riding that wave, Ray slowed things down. He waited a year before choosing his next project. Determined not to be boxed in too quickly, he deliberately softened his image with the emotional drama Dominic and Eugene, then followed it with one of the most iconic turns of his career in Field of Dreams, playing the quiet, mythic ghost of shoeless Joe Jackson. It was a performance built on restraint rather than aggression, and it showed a completely different side of him. Later in life, Ray looked back on that period with mixed feelings. He understood the caution, but he also recognized the missed momentum. The roles he turned down might have pushed his career even further, even faster. At the time, though, he was guided by instinct rather than strategy. And that instinct, sometimes hesitant, sometimes fearless, was exactly what shaped the unpredictable, unforgettable career that followed. The gamble that paid off. In 1990, Ray Liotta stepped into the life of real-world mobster Henry Hill in Goodfellas. Directed by Martin Scorsese, the film would go on to become a cultural landmark, celebrated by critics, embraced by audiences, and immortalized in cinema history. But long before the accolades rolled in, landing that role was anything but guaranteed. Scorsese had taken notice of Ray after seeing his explosive performance in Something Wild. That impression was strong enough to earn Ray a meeting, but not an audition in the traditional sense. Instead of reading lines, the two simply talked. It was informal, intense, and intimidating. Every actor in Hollywood wanted the part, and Ray knew it. The pressure was enormous, even if the process didn't look like one. The real test came later, in an unexpected place. Both men found themselves in Venice for separate projects, and Ray, eager to stay visible, tried to approach Scorsese in a hotel lobby. With tensions high around Scorsese at the time and security on full alert, Ree barely made it a few steps before being blocked and pushed aside by bodyguards. From across the room, the two men locked eyes. Ree didn't argue or force the moment. He stayed calm, acknowledged the situation, and quietly stepped away. That brief, wordless exchange stayed with Scorsese. Later, he explained that while Ray was already on his short list, there was still one major concern. The role of Henry Hill wasn't just another character. It was the spine of the entire film. Ray had to look authentic, carry authority, project innocence, and still be charming enough to draw audiences into a world filled with violence and moral decay. Watching how Ray handled himself in that tense lobby moment showed him something important: restraint, confidence, and quiet control. That was the moment everything clicked. Even then, the battle wasn't over. Convincing Warner Brothers was another challenge entirely. Producer Irwin Winkler wasn't sold. From a studio perspective, Ray simply wasn't a big enough name to anchor a major release. According to longtime Scorsese collaborator Barbara DeFina, executives wanted star power that would guarantee ticket sales. The alternative ideas were wildly different. Winkler later admitted that names like Tom Cruise were discussed for Henry Hill, with Madonna even considered for Karen. At one point, the project threatened to drift far from the gritty realism that would eventually define it. Ray refused to fade quietly into the background. In a chance encounter outside a Los Angeles restaurant, he finally confronted Winkler face to face and made his case. It wasn't arrogance. It was conviction. He laid out why he understood the role and why he was right for it. That conversation changed everything. The very next morning, Winkler called Scorsese and admitted he finally saw what the director had been fighting for. Even with Ray attached, the studio still wasn't completely sold. They needed something or someone to make them feel safe. That reassurance came the moment Robert De Niro signed on. Once De Niro stepped in, and with Joe Pesci and Scorsese reuniting after Raging Bull, the whole energy around the project shifted. This wasn't just another crime film anymore. It had real weight behind it. Now the studio felt comfortable taking a gamble on a lesser-known leading man. Everything seemed to be lining up perfectly. But just as momentum was building, tragedy was right around the corner. Production on Goodfellas was already moving at full speed when everything suddenly stopped for Ray Liotta. In the middle of filming, he received devastating news. His adoptive mother, the woman who raised him and shaped his life, was dying. Martin Scorsese learned what had happened and went straight to Ray's trailer. Inside, Ray was completely broken, overwhelmed by grief and disbelief, struggling to process why someone so kind had to suffer like that. Scorsese immediately told him to leave and be with his mother. No questions, no pressure. But Ray refused. He was shattered, but he insisted on staying and finishing the day's work. Scorsese checked again, making sure this wasn't bravado or denial. Ray was certain. They walked out to the set together. That day's scene was supposed to be celebratory. The crew marking their first big score, laughing, drinking, riding high. Before the cameras rolled, Scorsese gathered the cast and crew, including his own father, and quietly told them what Ray was going through. What followed was something none of them ever forgot. The joy on screen was real, but it was fueled by something deeper. Everyone knew why Ray was there, and that shared understanding transformed the moment. Grief, loyalty, love, and respect all collided, and the energy poured straight into the scene. The laughter felt louder, the smiles wider, almost defiant. Scorsese later said he had never experienced anything like it before and never did again. That emotional authenticity was baked into the entire film. Unlike sweeping crime epics about powerful mob royalty, Goodfellas lived much closer to the ground. Henry Hill and his crew weren't kings. They were working guys, violent, ambitious, and constantly chasing status they would never fully reach. Their world was cramped, tense, and dangerous. And Scorsese wanted it to feel real down to the smallest detail. To do that, he didn't rely solely on trained actors. The background of the film was filled with real neighborhood faces. An open casting call was even held at Rouse, a legendary spot with deep ties to the old-school Italian-American scene. Casting director Ellen Lewis later admitted it was a gamble. Some people were perfect for the camera. Others were a little too authentic with personal histories that made putting them on screen a risk. One person who absolutely could not appear was the Real Henry Hill himself. By the time filming began, Henry and his wife were already deep into witness protection after cooperating with authorities in the early 1980s. Ray never met Henry while preparing for the role. Instead, he studied hours of recorded interviews supplied by author Nicholas Pileggi, absorbing Henry's voice, rhythm, and worldview. Only after the film was finished did Henry finally reach out. When they met, his reaction surprised Ray. Henry wasn't concerned with accuracy or reputation. He was simply grateful he hadn't been portrayed as pure trash. Ray, caught off guard, pointed out that the film didn't exactly paint Henry as a saint. The realism sometimes went too far, even on set. Ray later revealed on the moment that one scene turned physical in an unexpected way. During a confrontation with actor Chuck Lowe, who played the wig shop owner, the action escalated for real. Lowe, a former real estate consultant for Robert De Niro, misread the moment and reacted instinctively. Ray was thrown into a wall, splitting his lip badly enough to require stitches. Filming stopped, doctors were called, and returned later that day to finish the scene. If viewers look closely, the injury is still visible in the footage that followed. When Goodfellas was released, it exploded. Critics praised it. Audiences embraced it. Awards followed, including multiple Oscar nominations and a win for Joe Pesci. Yet for Ray, the aftermath was complicated. Despite delivering one of the most iconic performances in film history, his career didn't follow the expected straight line to permanent A-list superstardom. A mix of bad timing, risky choices, and personal struggles slowed that momentum. The price of playing Henry Hill. If you step back and really look at Ray Liotta's career as a whole, there's a surprising pattern that often gets overlooked. For all his reputation as a tough guy, he actually played the nice guy far more often than people remember. He was warm and almost otherworldly as shoeless Joe Jackson in Field of Dreams. He was the clueless, romantic, getting hustled by con artists in Heartbreakers. He even spent 3 steady years early on playing Joey Perini on the soap opera Another World, a role that gave him stability long before Hollywood superstardom came knocking. But Liotta understood something about fame that many actors fight against. Audiences don't cling to the quiet performances. They remember the danger. He once pointed out that when people talk about legends like Al Pacino or Robert De Niro, they aren't reminiscing about the gentle roles. They jump straight to Raging Bull and The Godfather. For Liotta, that gravitational pull always led back to one character, Henry Hill in Goodfellas. That role followed him everywhere, and instead of resenting it, he embraced it. He loved how relentless the movie felt, how it never seemed to slow down, and he was genuinely amazed by its staying power. Years later, he noticed younger generations discovering it for the first time, recognizing him not by name, but as the Goodfellas guy. To him, that wasn't a burden. It was proof that the work had lasted. Off-screen, though, Liotta was honest about being complicated. While promoting the place Beyond the Pines, he admitted that his experience on set often depended on the person calling the shots. By then, director Derek Cianfrance was still early in his career, and Liotta confessed he could usually tell right away if a director was in over their head. For an actor with decades of experience, nothing frustrated him more than feeling guided by someone who didn't quite know where they were going. It wasn't just about directors. Liotta also revealed that his mood off camera often mirrored the character he was playing. When he played decent, likable men, he was easy to be around. When he played darker characters, that edge didn't always switch off between takes over time. And given how often he was cast as villains or heavies, it's easy to see how he might have built a reputation for being intense, even difficult without meaning to. Then there are the what-ifs, and Liotta's career is full of them. Today, it feels almost impossible to imagine anyone but Michael Keaton under the cape in Batman. Yet, Liotta later revealed that turning down an audition for the role became one of his biggest regrets. After seeing his breakout performance in Something Wild, director Tim Burton wanted a Batman who felt raw and edgy. And Liotta fit that vision perfectly. At the time, though, Liotta simply didn't understand the concept.